Burning Beast might be fiery hot, but Konami left these two ancient Union monsters alone in the cold. Luckily for them, they're about to kick off this list at the lowest spot, so who knows, maybe they'll be meta in a year. Freezing Beast is a level 4 water aqua monster with 1500 attack, and is the icy counterpart to Burning Beast, a level 4 pyro monster with the same stats. They both released in the 2003 set Magician's Force and have never seen competitive play, but with a little love from Konami, could someday see placements. Maybe. So, other than being old, what's interesting about these cards? Well, there is a sense of balance. Freezing and Burning Beast are both Union monsters, and the only closed pair of Union monsters in the game. Freezing Beast can only equip itself to Burning Beast, and the same is true in reverse. This symmetry could become a point of expansion for new hot and cold beast cards. But before we get into what it could be, let's look at what it actually is. During the main phase, you can equip a Freezing Beast you control to a Burning Beast. While this doesn't provide any stat bonuses, it does let you destroy a set spell or trap on the field whenever the equipped Burning Beast inflicts battle damage. When Burning Beast is equipped in the same way to Freezing Beast, it's able to destroy face-up spells or traps when the battle damage is inflicted by its partner monster. Both unions provide a measure of protection as well, where if they're equipped and would be destroyed by battle, they can take the destruction instead. It's not much payoff as is, but there are plenty of ways this could be reimagined. Support cards that equip Burning and Freezing Beast from the deck could synergize with extra fusion monsters to represent the combined beast, summonable by attributing your Freezing and Burning Beast equipped beasts. If we wanted to really get confusing with it, there could be a Freezing Burning Beast fusion and a Burning Freezing Beast fusion determined by which monster was tributed. Both Freezing and Burning Beast appear at the artwork for the quick play spell Combination Attack. This piece of Union support lets you unequip a Union monster during the battle phase while giving the previously equipped monster another attack. It's kind of hard to use, but if the great Yubel resurgence has taught us anything, it's that the silliest, clunkiest cards can be made good. No card is truly beyond redemption. But Freezing Beast and Burning Beast aren't the strongest contenders for archetypes Konami is likely to retool. While they are both archaic and interesting, they don't have anime features to buoy the relevance. Still, it would be nice to see these forgotten cards get just a little support. Just look at Freezing Beast. He's waiting so patiently and sitting like a little cat. Putting this next one on the list is a little risky, but at number 9, we have Pumpking, the King of Ghosts. This level 6 Dark Zombie from 2002's Metal Raiders has 1800 attack and 2000 defense, and is probably one of the likeliest unlikely candidates that Konami might actually retrain. What if it happens before the script comes out of production? It's entirely possible, but Yu-Gi-Oh's about taking risks, so let's go gambling. Pumpking has the effect that if Castle of Dark Illusions is on the field, its stats are immediately increased by 100 points. That might not sound like much, but hold on to your hats. Because for every turn Castle of Dark Illusions remains on the field alongside Pumpking, the Royal Guard will continue to gain 100 to each stat during your standby phase for the next 4 turns. For those of you who are having trouble keeping count of numbers so high, give up now because Castle of Dark Illusions also has a flip effect to increase the stats of all your zombie monsters by 200. Then, each of the zombies to receive the initial boost will continue to collect 200 as you pass standby phases for the next 4 turns. It's like Pumpkin Castle Zombie Monopoly. When all's said and done, your maximized Pumpking the King of Ghosts will pack an impressive 3300 attack and 3500 defense after 4 turns, if it all goes right. This is, of course, ridiculous, but that's what makes Pumpking such a good candidate for archetypal retrains. There's so much room for improvement. Yubel and Red Eye's Black Metal Dragon can relate. There's actually another Pumpkin card to consider, Pump Princess, the Princess of Ghosts, which is a level 3 Dark Zombie with 900 attack and 1000 defense from 2013 Shadow Spectre set. And instead of slowly buffing itself, it can slowly diminish the stats of opposing monsters. When she's destroyed face up in the monster zone, she moves back to the spell and trap card zone and starts gaining a pumpkin counter during each of your standby phases, with your opponent's monsters losing 100 attack and defense for every counter on the card. While this does share the same flaw as the grown-up pumpkin, in that it's too slow and too weak, Pump Princess was, for a short time, surprisingly good in Duel Links. An early release into the format, Pump Princess was an SR in the February 2017 main box, Valkyrie's Rage. By running Pump Princess alongside Wonder Balloons, an SR from the game's inaugural main box, Ultimate Rising, you could create a hugely oppressive and growing drain on your opponent's ability to attack. With limited options for back row removal, if you didn't have an answer for Pumpkin Balloons, you perished very, very slowly. These 100-point gains and losses are going to be tough to adapt to the modern game without significant changes, but that's fine. The idea of the Pumpkin royalty and their dark castle is to radically slow the pace of the game by both building high stat monsters and breaking your opponents down. One way to pivot this could be to tie the slow growth and decline to other effects and interruptions. Really make it so your opponent feels like they have to navigate a haunted mire of greedy vines. Everyone will probably hate it, but that kind of just makes this retrain more likely when you think about it. And the other factor making this actually a very likely unlikely retrain is that Pumpking was the ace monster of Bones and was used during his duel against Joey Wheeler during episode 18 of the Duel Monsters anime. It even has an animation in Duel Links. But the point is, Konami loves retraining Joey cards. They could even finally officially marry the Red Eye zombie concept to zombies that Joey actually faced. Burning Bright at number 8 is a card with the power to vanquish the gods. Allegedly. In practice, Pyramid of Light, a continuous trap from 2004's Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie promo set, is a huge disappointment. Its only effect happens when it's removed from the field, and it has to have been face up to resolve this effect. That's kind of unfortunate. But what powerful moves does Pyramid of Light bring to justify these conditions? Well, when it's removed, it destroys Androsphinx and Sphinx Talia on your side of the field and removes them from play. Two monsters that also come from the movie promo pack. Androsphinx and Sphinx Talia can special summon themselves from hand while Pyramid of Light is on the field by paying 500 life points. They're decently capable cards, and when they're destroyed at the same time, perhaps, but not necessarily by the effect of Pyramid of Light, you can pay another 500 life points in order to summon a copy of Thenian, the Great Sphinx, from hand or deck. Starting with a whopping 3,500 attack, when Thenian is summoned this way, it will gain 3,000 attack until the end phase. That's a big number, and a really big number for 2004, but not enough to one-shot your opponent from full life. But what's all this about Pyramid of Light defeating the gods in Yu-Gi-Oh? Well, the movie Pyramid of Light, Seto Kaiba seeks to get even with the Pharaoh after an embarrassing loss in the Battle City semifinals. But since Yugi now possesses all 3 god cards to Kaiba's 0, he'd need new cards. To do this, he drove his Blue Eyes Jet Dragon to Pegasus' private island, where he trounced the Duel Monsters creator in a duel to claim a card capable of rivaling the gods. Pegasus delivered the Blue Eyes Shining Dragon, but Kaiba found another card, Pyramid of Light. Alarmed that he had no prior knowledge of the card, Pegasus warned Kaiba against using it, but Kaiba didn't listen. The card had been planted by the Spirit of Anubis, an entity that would absorb the power created by Kaiba's duel against the Pharaoh, interrupting the match once he'd gathered sufficient energy to manifest in the physical realm. Anubis used Androsphinx, Sphinx Talia, and Thenian the Great Sphinx, and eventually just became a giant sludge dog monster to attack with himself. Retraining this archetype would be pretty easy since there aren't too many existing cards and they're already very interconnected. Maybe a really bright Pyramid of Light could summon Andro and Thalia from the deck, and a new monster could be printed to represent the Anubis Sludge Beast. Receiving their marching orders in 2002 from the Pharaoh Servant set is the number 7 card on this list, Goblin Attack Force. This level 4 Earth Warrior has an impressive 2300 attack, no defense, and a drawback effect intended to balance its premium low-level stat line. After declaring an attack with a Goblin Attack Force, they'll shift to defense position at the end of the battle phase, and they won't be able to change back until after the end phase of your next turn. With 0 defense, it's unlikely that your Goblin Attack Force will attack twice, but sometimes one attack is all you need. That's not to suggest that Goblin Attack Force is going to finish your opponent off, but in a simplified game state, a 2300 attack normal summon is great tap-in for a back-and-forth sludgefest. It actually even saw a smattering amount of placements way early on, and quite a few retrains. Check out Goblin Elite Attack Force, Goblin Recon Squad, Goblin Black Ops, Goblin Decoy Squad, and Goblin Marauding Squad. It even has a toon and anime-only Goblin Dancing Force. While none of these cards have been particularly relevant in a competitive context, they do form a solid foundation for what could become a resurrected nostalgia archetype, which is very much Konami's jam. If the Goblin squads are about one thing, it's big attacks. If they get a second thing, it's probably about quantity over quality. In a way, by printing new support to emphasize the Goblin armies' numbers over finesse approach, the archetype could provide an answer for what to do when your big Goblin attacks, leaving them stuck in defense mode, which is just to flood the field with more Goblins. If 100 Goblins can't fix the situation, maybe 1,000 will. Just summon more. Summon even more Goblins. In fact, the faster you and your opponent can churn through your Goblins, the more their playstyle aligns with the narrative of the Goblin army. There's quite a few Goblin squad monsters, but there are even more cards that show the Goblins getting thoroughly trounced by every corner of the Duel Monsters universe. We've got them getting lasered by robot spiders and 3D bioscanner, Counselor Lily is telling them to chill in air traffic control. Check them out getting ruined in Medusa Worm, Soul Absorbing Bone Tower, Tyrant's Tantrum, and Gemini Trap Hole. Perhaps most embarrassingly, Gaga Gigo literally ice skates circles around them in Espeon. And there are even more examples, so many more, and all is not well even amongst the goblins, since we can see Goblin Attack Force getting roasted by Goblin Elite Attack Force in the artwork of Supply Squad. Even the continuous trap Prepare to Strike Back, intended to give your defending goblins a fighting chance, is pretty embarrassing for them. The art shows them caught off guard in their pajamas while marauding captain storms their camp, and is likely actually another perspective of the events depicted in Attack on GHQ. The goblins are truly in a sorry state, but not without hope. A card from 2002 with so many artwork features always has potential for a reboot. Many will find the number 6 Retrain archetype on this list obnoxious. Some might even become enraged at the suggestion. Yep, we're talking about a whole archetype of Adjective Retrains. The way Konami goes about retraining cards is interesting. Sometimes they get a total reboot, like with Horus the Black Flame Dragon level 8 into Horus the Black Flame Deity, but sometimes the end result is a little closer to what came before. Remember Battle-Ox, the 1700 attack vanilla beater? Well, in 2004's Invasion of Chaos set, he got a little mad at the growing irrelevance of normal monsters, and we got the Retrained Enrage Battle-Ox, who has the same stats but extends piercing damage to all of your Beast, Beast Warrior, and Wing Beast monsters. And he's not the only enraged card. Muga Muga from the 2002's Metal Raiders also got an angry version 2 years later as part of Soul of the Duelist, the level 5 Enraged Muga Muga. Of course, this isn't really a retrain and more of an upgraded version that has better attack and defense stats and better stat scaling based on the number of cards in your hand, but it still fits with the core formula of Adjective plus Classic card. There's also Swift Gaia the Fierce Knight, an Adjective Retrain from the same 2004 collectible Tin Series 1 that brought us Obnoxious Celtic Guardian. Swift Gaia proves his swiftness by being able to normal summon without tributes when he's your last card in hand. And the Obnoxious Celtic Guardian proves his obstinance by being unable to be destroyed by battle with monsters that have 1900 or more attack. It's a common theme by now to give retrains and upgraded forms a little word before their name. And there are even a bunch more Gaia retrains in the same vein as Swift, like Charging and Arisen. But for the purposes of number 6, we're just going to focus on Enrage, Obnoxious, and Swift, since these retrains are kind of independent of any existing archetypes. Of course, Gaia is its whole thing by now, but at the time of Swiss printing, its identity hadn't yet solidified, and there's kind of the bare bones of a Celtic Guardian archetype between Obnoxious, Original, and Noble Arms, but not enough that this would step on the toes of a dedicated cohort of Celtic cards. That would actually make a pretty good candidate for this list, but since we're already talking about Obnoxious in this entry, they'll just have to hold off for now. What's interesting about the Enraged, Swift, and Obnoxious triangle is that each adjective does a different thing. Enraged cards could focus on attacking and making the battle phase more lethal. Swift cards would hit their stride, set into the field. The function of the Obnoxious is to ensure you get another turn because your opponent can't just get rid of you. It'd be kind of funny to even have equip cards that add an adjective to a card's name, making them honorary parts of the archetype by getting the Enraged, Obnoxious, and Swift title. Coming in at number 5, we have a level 2 normal monster that as yet has not seen a release in the TCG. Cyber Commander might have only 750 attack and 700 defense, no effect, and no presence outside the OCG, but this is just a blank slate for Konami to draw a new archetype on. But if Cyber Commander never made it to the TCG, from where does the invigorating nostalgia stem? That would be from episodes 12 and 13 of the Duel Monsters anime. In these episodes, the Spirit of the Millennium Ring emerges for the first time to challenge the Pharaoh for ownership of the Millennium Puzzle. The shadow game that ensues involves Yugi, Joey, Taya, Bakura, and Tristan merging with their favorite cards to become the pieces used by both ancient spirits to advance the game. Yugi was predictably the Dark Magician, and Joey took up the mantle of the Flame Swordsman. Taya became the Magician of Faith, and Bakura made a surprise appearance as a spell card Change of Heart. Tristan hit the field as his favorite card, the Cyber Commander, and was quickly dispatched by Yami Bakura's white magical hat. Luckily, the Pharaoh managed to revive Cyber Commander with Monster Reborn before Tristan's soul fell prey to the Reaper of the Cards. It's canon that Tristan isn't super good at dueling, a shortcoming that we witnessed during Noah Kaiba's Virtual World arc when he loses to Robotic Knight Nesbit, a duel in which he incidentally summoned Cyber Commander and the anime-only monster Command Angel. The Angel's effect to boost the attack of fairies by 400 doesn't really synergize with Tristan's preferred cards, but since it was used in a tag duel, it did help his teammate Serenity. Anyway, Cyber Commander being Tristan's favorite card is probably more evidence of his clumsy dueling. although maybe he would have gone with Lava Battle Guard if he hadn't given it to Joey in episode 11. But why has Cyber Commander never been ported to the TCG? Well, that might have something to do with its realistic looking weaponry. While it's never been printed, Cyber Commander is available in a few video games, where it has always received an art censorship to make it appear as less violent. While the realistic firearms in the card art for Cyber Commander might make this card a tough sell for the American market, it's still got an anime feature, which means it's not totally without hope for a retrain, even if this is somewhat unlikely. But Cyber Commander did receive a slight buff in Duel Links, where by raising Tristan Taylor to level 4, you can claim the Deckmaster effect Cyber Commander skill. Passively, this skill increases the attack and defense of all your warrior machine monsters by 300 while Cyber Commander is on the field. And actively, you can choose to trade your normal draw for fetching a copy of Cyber Commander from your deck each turn. While this is absolutely not enough for Cyber Commander to ever see play, it's still an interesting nod to both Tristan's favorite card and the Deckmaster rules that applied during his doomed virtual world duel against Nesbit in episode 106. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game that loves a big dragon. Blue Eyes White Dragon, Albion the Sanctifier Dragon, Crimson Dragon, and Dragon Maid Shio are just a few examples. If we sat here naming all of Yu-Gi-Oh's big dragons, this video would be too long. But what about a big dragon from early Yu-Gi-Oh! That's been pretty much ignored for years and years and years? Berserk Dragon is a level 8 dark zombie monster with 3500 attack and no defense from 2003's Dark Crisis set, and is the number 4 pick on this list. It's technically not a dragon, but whatever. Able to attack all of your opponent's monsters once each with its 3500 attack, Berserk Dragon is a card to be underestimated at your own peril. It's got an end phase effect where it loses 500 attack, meaning next turn you'll just have a Berserk Dragon with 3000 attack, and then 2500, and so on and so forth until 0. But it's unlikely Berserk Dragon is going to be on that field that long anyway. Either it's getting popped, or you're going to win the duel. So far, this card doesn't seem so bad. So what happened? Why wasn't everyone running Berserk Dragon in 2003? Like many tragically forgotten cards, it can't be normal summoned or set. Instead, it must be special summoned by the effect of a Deal with the Dark Ruler, a quick play spell card that can be activated if a level 8 or higher monster has been sent from your field to the graveyard this turn. On resolution, it special summons a Berserk Dragon from your hand or deck. Interestingly, a Deal with the Dark Ruler is always treated as an Archfiend card, but while that does align it with having an existing archetype, the Archfiends as a class are too big to have a cohesive identity, instead splitting into many divergent sects like the Summoned Skulls, the Red Dragons, and the Imperials. This opens up space for Berserk Dragon to become its own thing, or at least a smaller thing that's easier to amalgamate into other strategies. And there's some interesting lore to play with here too. It's worth noting that despite being searched by an Archfiend card, Berserk Dragon is itself not an Archfiend, or even a fiend itself. Instead, it is the zombie servant of Dark Ruler Hades, another powerful fiend with a distinct identity from the Archfiends. Deriving inspiration from Hades, the Greek god of the underworld, Hades is served by Octoclops, Winged Minion, and Dark Resonator, in addition to Berserk Dragon. Dark Resonator, depicted in service of Hades in the card Mind Trust, is of particular note here, since it expands the potential depth of Hades' ability to broker power. Have the Red Dragon Archfiends entered into a pact with Hades too? Other Archfiends certainly have. Although Hades would eventually be vanquished by the Dark King of the Abyss and Dark Ruler no more, he would return as revived King Hades, boasting even more powerful servants like Archfiend Zombie Skull. There's potential for some fun archetypal gimmicks here. Perhaps you can force your opponent's hand into their own Deal with the Dark Ruler. But to keep things from getting too broad, Berserk Dragon is the best example we have of a Dark Ruler's machinations, and could be brought back at any point like any good zombie. And for the number 3, we're sticking with the Archfiends. This spot on this list goes to the line of the Archfiend cards that take inspiration from another strategy game, chess. Most of these cards came from the 2003's Dark Crisis set and were the first Archfiends to print, if you don't count some earlier cards like Black Skull Dragon and Shadow Tamer that were incidental Archfiends because of their OCG names and would get canonized into the archetype later. But back to the official chess fiends. Vile Pawn Archfiend is an analog for pawns. Bishops get Dark Bishop Archfiend, Rooks are Death Rook Archfiend, and for Knights we have Shadow Knight Archfiend. Dark Crisis also introduced Infernal Queen Archfiend and Terror King Archfiend to coincide with the two most important chess pieces, but both have since received upgraded forms, with Phantom Darkness yielding Imprisoned Queen Archfiend in 2008, and the 2018 set Extreme Force providing Master King Archfiend a Link 2. In addition to these monsters, we also have the normal spell Checkmate, a bunch of artwork features in cards like Dice Knight, Subspace Battle, Archfiend Ruler, and more. We've got all the materials for a pretty cool archetype here. Scary devil monsters, a famous strategy game to draw inspiration from, and classic cards with nostalgia perks. But why weren't chess Archfiends ever a real thing? Well, they just weren't very good. They all had dice rolls that could let them negate targeting effects sometimes, and also came with life point tax charges during the standby phase. Shadow Knight Archfiend might be a low level with 2000 attack, but it's not worth paying 900 life points every turn, even if it can negate and destroy opponents' targeting cards when you happen to roll a 3. Plus, it has its battle damage halved for no discernible reason. While rolling dice doesn't have a ton to do with chess, some mechanics of the chess Archfiends do successfully invoke their inspiration. While you control Vilepon Archfiend, your opponent is unable to target other Archfiends for attacks. So it's kind of like having your row of weak pawns stand between your powerful pieces and your opponent's army. When Terror King Archfiend is destroyed, you can send Deathstroke Archfiend from hand to grave to revive the king. While this isn't really directly rook-like behavior, rooks are able to protectively trade places with the king piece in a maneuver called castling. Ultimately, this all might be interesting, but it's certainly not good. Not in 2003, and definitely not now. But that's part of what primes chess Archfiends for a resurgence. With the introduction of Link monsters, positioning on the board is way bigger part of the game than during the Dark Crisis days. It'd be interesting to see a reborn chess Archfiend archetype make use of this mechanic, maybe gaining extra techniques hinging on their spatial relationship to each other. If a chess Archfiend is destroyed by battle while retooled Rook Archfiend occupies an adjacent space, maybe Rook Archfiend could move to occupy the empty space and retaliate against the attacker. Your Vilepon Archfiend could enjoy extra advantages when attacking into the extra monster zone at a diagonal, and a pawn-based Link could enjoy the same perks when attacking diagonally into your opponent's main monster zones. What if Vilepon Archfiend could turn into a queen after destroying a monster, like when a pawn makes it to the far side of the game board? What if Infernal Queen Archfiend was actually good? There's a lot of material here, and they might have received a Link monster somewhat recently, but they could be given a lot more. The Dark Scorpions are a band of Dark Attribute Warrior Thieves, and they're here to steal the number 2 spot on this list. With leader Don Zalug and the Dark Scorpion Burglars printed in 2003's Pharaonic Guardian, the rest of the rogues would get their own dedicated cards a little later, with Dark Scorpion Cliff the Trap Remover arriving a few months later with Magician's Force, meanwhile Monet, Gorg, and Chick showing up a few months after that as part of Dark Crisis. The Scorpions are willy and demonstrate this through their variable effects. After inflicting battle damage, each Scorpion card plus Don Zalug and minus Dark Scorpion Burglars gets to choose between an effect that generates advantage and one to penalize your opponent's deck. And a lot of these effects aren't bad. Monet can search a Dark Scorpion card or revive one. Chick, Gorg, and Cliff remove cards from your opponent's field, and Don Zalug can perform a random rip from your opponent's hand. The deck destruction side of their effects hasn't aged so well, however. While Monet can actually choose between 2 different advantages effects, and Chick the Yellow can spy in your opponent's top deck and leave it there or put it on the bottom, Gorg, Cliff, Burglars, and Don Zalug just mill cards from top of your opponent's deck into the graveyard, which in the modern games is more likely to help your opponent set up their field than dump valuable assets. They have some spell and trap support in the form of Mustering of the Dark Scorpions and Dark Scorpion combination, and also the board clearing Dark Scorpion Tragedy of Love that's in Duel Links but not in the TCG, but overall the Dark Scorpion concept is much cooler than the execution. And the good news is, this makes them great candidates for a revival. Another point in their favor, they also have some cool anime love. In the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, Don Zalug was a minor antagonist, one of the 7 Shadow Riders that aimed to resurrect the Sacred Beasts. To this end, Don and his motley crew of thieves would steal the keys to the Spirit Gates held by Jaden and co. While this didn't wind up working since the keys have to be won in a duel to function, Don Zalug was eventually able to square off against irate key holder, the Chaz Princeton. Although he and the rest of the Scorpions would lose, they get a happy ending throwing a dorm party with the other dual monster spirits that reside in Chaz's deck. Reigning over this list at number 1 is the Machine King, a level 6 Earth Machine monster with 2200 attack and 1000 defense. Despite being available in the OCG since the previous millennia, meaning 1999, Machine King didn't see release into the TCG until 2004 as a promo card given to participants of the Duelist League Series 4 events. Luckily, in 2005, it was included in the Dark Beginning 2 set, but that's still way later than this iconic card of classic Yu-Gi-Oh! Deserved. Its effect isn't super interesting, since all it does is gain 100 attack for every machine-type monster on the field. But that's kind of cool because it demonstrates how Machine King gains strengths from its subjects. The constituents of Machine King include Mechanical Chaser, Cyber Soldier, and Robotic Knight, who are all vanilla monsters with their allegiance clarified in their descriptive text. A cool thing about Machine King is that future reimaginings of it show us how it has evolved over the years and give a glimpse into the evolutions to come. Starting with Machine King 3000 BC from 2010's Absolute Power Force, we see how the oldest Machine King isn't even a monster yet, and is instead a continuous trap that later becomes one. 2006's Shadow of Infinity brought us Machine King Prototype, a low-level version of Machine King with lower stats and almost the same effect. Then we have Machine King, and finally Perfect Machine King, a level 8 Earth Machine with 2700 attack and 1500 defense that releases part of 2004's Rise of Destiny set. Interestingly, Perfect Machine King was easier to acquire than Machine King, since the latter would remain an exclusive promo card until about a year after the debut of its perfect form. Like the original model, Perfect Machine King gains attack for every machine on the field, but grows by 500 as opposed to Machine King's 100. But other than gaining attack, these cards don't really do much, but that's okay. For the purposes of this list, it's actually great. The Machine Kings are pretty much a quarter-century-old blank slate where a new archetype can be designed. The attack boost for each machine could be adjusted for scale in the modern era. Maybe the first machine grants 100, and the second 200, and the third 300, and so forth and so forth. Combined with support to turn all the monsters in the field into machines, that could be the start of something. Or not. There are as many possibilities for new Machine Kings here as Konami wants to print. What was Machine King doing between 3000 BC and its prototype days? It was probably up to something, because in the modern age, this card gets around, with appearances in Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, GX, and 5Ds. In the DM era, Machine King was used by Brainwashed Bandit Keith against Yugi Muto in episode 50, and was used again by Robotic Knight Nesbit against Duke Devlin, Serenity Wheeler, and Tristan Taylor in episode 106. Nesbit even fused his Robotic Knight avatar with Machine King in order to become the perfect Machine King, which isn't how that actually works, but whatever. Many such cases. The Big Five would pilot the analog of Tristan Taylor to again use Machine King in their tag duel against Yugi and Joey, but it got destroyed by Des Vostalv. No matter, because the Machine King rose again in episode 114 of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX as part of a flashback, and again in episode 114 in 5Ds by an opponent of Crow Hogan. With a bevy of anime history and over 2 decades under its mechanical belt with no solid archetypal identity, Machine King takes the gold for Konami's next top Retrain archetype. Hopefully it can take the metal home and smelt it down to give itself some upgrades. Alright, and that's the list. If you got some suggestions for some more retooled archetypes or ideas for future videos just like this one, I'd love to write them down in the comments.